In 1908, the French Impressionist painter Claude Monet painted this scene of the Palazzo Dario in Venice. Apart from appearing in a Monet painting, this building holds a far more sinister and darker history, which belie the intense colours within Monet's impression. In 1993, the Italian business tycoon Raoul Gardini shot himself in the head in Milan. The Italian media covering the event spoke of the massive corruption scandal that had already led to 11 suicides. The Italian prosecutors were following a trail of evidence that linked Gardini to a $100 million payoff to top politicians in Italy. However, at the same time in Venice, the media and local rumour mill took a different approach to Gardini's suicide. Within the Palazzo Dario, he was the owner of the Dario, a palace on the Grand Canal, and was said to be one of the many victims of people who lived or owned this property. The Dario is one of the most well-known buildings in Venice, once likened it to a decrepit courtesan. The palace was originally built in 1488 by Giovanni Dario, who was a Venetian diplomat who negotiated a peace treaty with the Turks in 1479. He didn't actually spend a lot of time there, as he kept being dispatched abroad on diplomatic work. He actually said, "I have entered my 8th decade and I'm grown so fat and so afflicted with illness that my last days are nigh, and I would like to spend them at home in Venice." He wrote this in desperation to the Doge of Venice, who had just ordered him to go from Constantinople to Persia. Franz Babinger, who is a German author who has written a biography of the Dario, traces the first serious problems in the palace to the nobleman's son-in-law Vincenzo Barbaro, who insulted an official and was publicly disgraced and stripped of his office. Then later he was murdered. His wife Marietta, Dario's daughter, died of shame. Her tomb and that of her father is on a nearby island and were later used to store gunpowder, which was actually blown up by an Austrian siege in 1849. Even as dead people, they were not allowed to escape the curse of the Dario. Later, an Armenian diamond merchant who once owned the palace is said to have grown spectacularly bankrupt. Then Rawdon Lubbock Brown, an English historian and friend of Robert Browning, bought the Dario in 1839 and spent a fortune on it. He also went bankrupt and also committed suicide. Eventually the building was split into apartments, one of which belonged to the French poet Henri de Ragnier. Upon moving in, he soon died of malaria. It was at this point that the curse of the Dario really took hold among the population of Venice, and Venetians began to see the palace as a deadly and seductive courtesan who enacted revenge on those who sought to own her completely. A famous tenor known by the name of Mario da Monaco entered into negotiations to buy one of the apartments and then broke it off after a car accident. Following this, an American eccentric called Charles Briggins bought the entire palace in the 1950s, but was thrown out of Italy because he invited too many Italian soldiers around for parties. An American resident who once lived there also recalls the numerous deaths that took place in the building, often of unknown or unfamous people, convincing him that it was indeed cursed. Following the deportation of Briggs, a Count Felipe della Lanze from Turin bought the building in 1968. 2 years later he was murdered there by his Yugoslavian lover, who beat him to death with a candelabra. Following this, the next owner, Kit Lambert, the famous manager of the rock group The Who, complained that the bloodstains were still on the bedroom floor when he moved in and could not remove them. Lambert is remembered fondly in Venice because he threw wild rock and roll parties, but his health was worn away by his lifestyle and died of a brain tumour at the age of 45. The ownership was then followed by that of a Venetian financier called Fabrizio Ferrari, whose sister almost immediately died in a car crash. Within a few years he'd lost his entire fortune and was ruined. The doomed and corrupt Raoul Gardini was the next one and went out of his way to buy the palace in 1980 from a German insurance company. He bought the company and sold it, minus the palace, which he wanted to keep for himself. Then he transferred the Dario to his own family business assets. He gave it to his daughter as a wedding gift, but her marriage soon failed, Since then, there's been numerous talk of casual residents who have lived in the building, who've also committed suicide, gone bankrupt, or died under sudden or mysterious illnesses, to the point now where the building is owned by a private financier who doesn't actually live there, although it's rented out to the Guggenheim Museum for occasional art exhibits, and has also been featured in ghost hunters shows. This brings home the point: what actually constitutes a cursed building? Was the building built on the site of a previous building or location where horrors were unleashed? Is it built in a space that just has negative energies naturally located there? Why that building and not the building next to it? Is even the architectural shape, the designs, and the various forms and symbols in the building attracting this negative energy? Or does it just draw people who are doomed?